Everybody, welcome back. Capitalism Remix. I'm thrilled today. We have a great show for you with one of I think this might be the first time we've done this, with one of the Conscious Venture Conscious Venture Fund CEOs, portfolio CEOs, and a Conscious Venture Lab alumni, Matt Barinholtz, the CEO of Future Makers. We've had a great conversation. I can't wait for you to hear it. Welcome back. This is the Remix. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Capitalism Remix. I am your host, as you know, Jeff Cherry of Conscious Venture Partners. And I am so thrilled today to talk to my good friend, Matt Barinholtz. Matt is the CEO of Future Makers. He's a Conscious Venture Lab alumni and a newly minted, although we worked on it for a long time, a newly minted Conscious Venture Partners portfolio company. So, Matt, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks, Jeff. I'm great. I can't complain one bit.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I know we haven't talked one-on-one in a long time. It's been quite a bit, although we've been going back and forth trying to get those documents done. I'm glad we finally made that happen.
We are too, and it's a process, and it's about trusting the process.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that the the best thing that can happen is the time that passed. The time that passed from cohort 8 wrapping up to now is was really necessary, important, maturing time.
Yep.
And just thinking about how it takes a minute for a transformation to settle in and fully integrate. It took a minute. I mean, it took 2 years. It took almost 24 months to really understand who's benefiting from the work that we do. We can talk more about it, but the time was right. It wasn't a long time. It was the right time.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us about Future Makers, right? The company that came through the lab and that we just invested in. I like to ask this question about why does this company need to exist?
This company needs to exist because there's a real disconnect right now between learners and educators. And educators, especially the educators that we exist to serve, elementary school educators, are struggling. There's a common story right now that teachers are struggling. And it's not just because of having a period of distance learning from 2020 to 2022, but reconnecting and finding ways of building great relationships with little ones that are learning is really the biggest challenge they're facing right now. And so we exist to spark some playful learning, so those educators and those learners can build closer relationships, and in the process, learn about basic engineering principles and properties and mindsets.
How did you come up with this idea, Matt? I mean, that end of that, the basic engineering principles and concepts and processes. How did you come up with the idea to create Future Makers, and why is the engineering angle? You think that's important?
Future Makers came along when I was at a point working with a community of educators and students in a really unusual setting. I was a leader in a school that served young men from DC that were in detention, that were locked up. The school's located in Laurel, and working in a secure facility really, really opens your eyes to the inputs. What led up to those young people being, adjudicated and incarcerated. And Future Makers started as a sabbatical. It started as, like a lot of educators right now, it started as me really needing a break from leading vocational programming, supporting educators who, in that setting, it was a real invigorating and also really challenging space to do the work of conventional education. So I took a sabbatical trying to figure out what are ways that I can use my skills as what we used to call them shop teachers or tech ed teachers. That was basically my background. And I wanted to get involved earlier on with young people who, trying to stem that on-ramp into, being adjudicated or being involved in that sort of cradle to prison pipeline that so many young people in DC were really experiencing. So Future Makers really was something that came out of that. And as you can see, there's some product.
Yeah, you guys are working. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So I'll back up a little bit and give a little bit more context. The Future Makers was a response to educators outside of that facility that I was working in, who were asking, "Hey, Matt, I heard about the pretty interesting stuff that you're doing. You're doing it in a strange place. You're doing welding, you're doing woodworking, you're doing carpentry, you're doing blacksmithing, and you're working with these young people that normally, people wouldn't trust to put a hammer or a torch or cutting tools or things like that in the hands of young men, especially young men in a secure facility. And you're getting results. You're getting you're really opening eyes on the outside as well as on the inside.
What were some of the results? What were some of the results that when you say you're getting results? Tell me a little bit about that. What do you mean by that? What was happening?
I mean, there's here I am, a middle-aged white guy in a facility that is staffed and is housing primarily African American males. The young people that I'm working with are, they're not necessarily. These were primarily young men who were incredibly entrepreneurial, incredibly creative, really talented, working with an incredibly constrained set of tools, resources, mentors, coaches, and still were very successful in a lot of ways. They just weren't successful in typical get good grades, go to school, because of all of these factors that were working against them from the point that they were born.
Right.
And the results that I was getting really wasn't about my participation as much as being an integrated part of a whole, that I was a hands-on learning component in a school that was reinvented in what used to be called Oak Hill is now called New Beginnings. It's a phenomenal youth facility, residential facility for young men in Laurel, Maryland. It's just a fantastic, fantastic place. It happens to be operated by, the District of Columbia. It happens to serve young men that, really have been referred to long-term or at least, more structured detention. And seeing the communication and confidence in math class after using the ruler in shop class with me, hearing from other educators that the ones that typically aren't as interested in the book learning or the screen-based learning, they're getting more engaged because of the hands-on learning. And the practical, it's just part of a whole. You can't human unless you sort of find that thing that you are most passionate about. So, the power of the hands and learning with our hands and our heads and our hearts, that was the whole school. It wasn't my results. So I worked really hard at being an integral part of a whole. And that's where the results happened. So when educators outside of that facility were sending me notes saying, "Hey, I heard you're doing woodshop.
Yep.
Could you and some of the boys that you're serving come out and visit my classroom? Unfortunately, the answer was no.
Right.
But once I got more and more of those requests, it was like, something's happening here. What do we do? So I spent about 6 months trying to figure out, what does woodshop look like outside? And how do I bring what we've done within New Beginnings into schools in DC and Prince George's County and Howard County and other places? And that just started a little trip into building, the beginning of Future Makers 13 years ago.
So that's so fascinating. So, you know, how does that experience then lead you to think about, I want to create a business around this, right? Because there's a couple of pieces of your background. One is an educator, right? You know how much I hate ed tech stuff because of dealing with schools and dealing with it, that whole complex and how long it takes. And then people think about education and should education be connected with business and all that sort of stuff. So you have that part of your background. And then you have a degree in sculpture from Washington U in St. Louis, right? So you're creative, right? And most people think they have this impression that because you're creative, you only care about the art, you don't care about business. So you have these two things that would seemingly set you on a path other than becoming a CEO. So how do those things translate into you creating a business around future makers? And then how do you see, so that's question one. And question two is, how do you see future makers? How do you see this business, or do you see this business contributing to that problem that you articulated from working with the kids in Laurel?
I'm just to quickly answer question two. It already is. It's already making a difference. We're already the interventions that sort of come from confident educators using Sparks, which is the products that we build. These are basically hands-on construction kits. We are all of our, from discovery all the way through our recent just sort of check-in interviews on a regular basis. The story that we consistently hear is, I knew that this young person had a lot in them. I didn't know that they could lead others. They were always the one that was goofing around. But as soon as they got that thing and they were building that machine that stands up and wiggles and draws, they were teaching the class. When I saw that happen, I knew that my hint was right and I could make a better connection with that learner. So when that educator makes a stronger bond, that's the first intervention that
Yeah,
pulls them back away from getting on that on-ramp, because
right.
they're gonna want to lead somewhere. So let's start by leading and building and getting the feedback from that educator. Going sort of back to the first question, I want you to really evaluate. I'm not trying to push back. I'm actually trying to challenge your primary assumption. Our traditional sort of art people, how entrepreneurial are they? Are they on the low end of the spectrum? I just want to sort of have a,
Yeah, look, don't I'm
yeah,
I
right?
this is not my assumption, as you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
because I'm an architect by training, and people
right?
say, "How did you get from architecture to being an investor?" And I'm like, I think it's the dumbest question I ever heard, because we think differently about how to create things, and
Exactly.
create things is not just the things that we're taught to create in architecture school or in sculpture class.
Yeah,
It's a different way of thinking about creating anything.
yeah.
So I don't have that same bias,
I
but I
know.
but I think that people would like to hear, right? I think
Yes.
that the audience like to hear for the two of us to talk about
Yeah.
how, as creatives, we've taken that creative mindset,
Hmm.
right, and turned it into something that most people wouldn't. I'm sure you get the same question. How did you get from being a sculptor to being the CEO of this type of business? Right. So
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah. I'm a terrible sculptor. I'm a great problem solver.
Yeah.
I
Lots of people
really,
say I was a terrible architect. Don't believe them.
and I was, and when I had a studio practice, when I was fortunate enough very early on as a young person to be trusted enough with the time and the space to do the work, I gravitated towards community work. and working with groups of people.
Yep.
Early on, my mom, when she was here all the way up until the very end, had a practice of making, was an amazing fiber artist, was an incredibly creative, really talented entrepreneur. My father, incredibly hardworking, very talented entrepreneur. Dad went towards starting and running and owning a collection agency and solving problems for his customers. My mom had a lot of individual relationships with a lot of people and solved a lot of problems for her customers. They used their gifts. I'm fortunate enough to be standing on the shoulders of generations of people who just by hook or by crook to survive and then to thrive and then to raise their families up took those talents. So being an artist was a privilege. That was the gift of all the generations that I stood on the shoulders of. And then once I got to this place where I'm in a studio in New Mexico in a residency program with a museum, and they say, here's your space, go. I immediately start goofing around and meeting people and inviting them into my studio because I was not confident enough on my own to have my own rigorous practice as a artist. But I learned through that there are these people called community artists, and they're very, very focused on engaging others and solving real problems in communities. So fast forward after that residency experience, in my early 20s, I needed a job, and I was invited to participate in standing up a youth adult partnership business as the Levi's plant in Roswell, New Mexico was being shut down and shipped overseas. The money that Levi's left behind, thank goodness, helped start a youth business and was really my first exposure to running a production business with teenagers and adult volunteers and making it successful and learning how to sell product that we fabricated into the National Park Service and into gift shows and sort of having that sort of basic or catalogs, having those basic experiences. Really, that was the bug. That's where it started. And I saw that I can be a great, I can have some interesting ideas, but nothing can happen without a team.
Right.
And the greatest artists never worked completely by themselves, whether they had a gallerist or a rep or some other people that championed them. The great artists are incredibly entrepreneurial and really understand how to tell their story. By the time I was working after a career in youth services, Future Makers sort of stood itself up because the big opportunity was what happened to shop class and what if it was in grade school? And that was a dozen years of that work that eventually with another pivot turned into us being a manufacturer of materials that can stand up shop class in grade school all over the country and beyond.
We were at an interesting perspective. We were at UVA with the cohort the last time around visiting Ed Freeman and Cyrus, who talks about what really makes entrepreneurship. Always talks about this idea is that um, businesses that need to be created, they will they will they will come into existence and grow and thrive because they simply need to exist, right? But someone's got to take the lead there, and it's really really interesting how you talk about this idea, like, because most schools don't have shop class anymore, right? My old partner Rick Frazier has talked about this idea is that why we lost shop class and we lost the idea of internships, right? That the traditional school is not for everybody, right? And to be able to sort of create a business around that is what's interesting to us, right? Interesting to me. um and how you did that. Tell me about the name. Where did the name Future Makers come from?
I mean,
I don't know if
it's
we've
sort
ever
of,
talked about that before, but
it was Google it and it shows up all over the place, but
Yeah.
it primarily shows up um, in innovation contexts. And in 2011, um, that really was thinking about, again, the idea that I think a lot of adults have of, what is the experience of a young person who's living in a secure facility? What are they thinking about? It's hard for an adult who has especially an adult that looks like me, comes from a background that I had. You sort of write off
Yep.
any notion of future. What's future? Future is probably going to look very similar to that small room that, if they're older, we're probably sharing with another person in another facility locked away and warehoused. And um, agency is something that isn't naturally, sort of like you're just not sort of putting those ideas together. So this was Future Makers. Really, the idea came from like, how do young people literally, I believe in making, shop class and tech ed and people that make stuff in the early aughts into 2011, 2012, making makerspace,
Yep.
maker fairs. The idea of maker is the new word for the skilled craftsperson, tradesperson, fabricator, problem solver, manufacturer. So future and makers just sort of puts it all together. And you can say it one way or the other. They're making future or they're future makers. So
Yeah.
that's sort of where that comes from. And it's just keeping the focus on where we're going.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's both about them, your customers,
Yeah.
but it's also about you, your company, right? You are creating future makers, right? They are going to be makers in the future because of or the potential to become makers in the future because of the work you do with them, but you're also remaking their future in terms of how they might see themselves, right? It's not just about the tinkering and the building of things,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And turning them into builders of things, but it's also using the building of things to have them think about their futures differently.
There's a person usually in the middle of that as well. And I wasn't seeing this really until after our cohort wrapped up. And the gift that that really is consistently giving me and giving future makers that CVL really allowed uh, to happen is the notion of, who are the beneficiaries, not just who are the stakeholders, but who's really benefiting and how do you measure that impact? And when I was deep in the reflective part of the cohort, I
Yeah,
was convinced, yes, this is all about those young people and we're sparking future makers. But there's an adult in between that, whether that is a caregiver or a parent, or an educator, a librarian, an after school program staff, a rec center staff. There is a non-related adult for the most part
yep,
in most children's lives that are the ones that sort of pitch them in a direction, give them an inspiration. Jeff, like when you think back to um, think back to elementary if you can. Did you have a hands-on learning experience when you were either in sort of like upper elementary or middle school as part of education?
yeah. I mean, I think we still had shop class, right?
Yeah.
And then you had an elective, and
Yep.
this is what did it for me. The elective was mechanical drawing,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And there was
Right.
someone there and said, "Hey, you might have an aptitude for this mechanical
Right.
drawing thing." So, everyone says you have to be good at math to be an architect. I was lousy at math, right? The thing I found out is that if you're if you have the creative side and you can struggle through the physics and the and the calculus, which I did, and I did okay. Once you get out, then I can open the book. Every test is an open book test, right? But the interesting thing for me was understanding, and this goes back to something you said earlier about how these kids that you were working with changed their relationship to the math problems because of working with the ruler for you, right? The thing that clicked with me when I got better at math was when one of my professors at Catholic, I was in college at Catholic, you were early on, said, you're sort of, just, struggling your way through this and not really working to get better. You're working to get through. But here's the thing you have to understand. The better you are at this mainly being calculus and physics, the better you are at that, the better you're going to be at design because you're going to understand the limits of materials.
Yep.
If you don't understand the limits of materials, you're always going to have to play it safe. Right? You're not even going to know what questions to ask. I was like,
That's
well,
it.
I can just ask my structural engineer. He said, yeah, you could, but you won't even know what questions to ask because you won't even know where the limits might be. And that's the thing that clicked in my mind. I said, well, maybe I get better at this. Right?
And you're talking about critical thinking skills. You don't know what you don't know. And then when you sort of work from a place of maybe knowing, you're going to discover it. And then that experience. So now think about this. The thing that really is the people at the center of Future Makers Universe and the people that I am really thinking about all the time. And don't get me wrong, third, fourth, fifth graders are awesome. They're amazing. They're open. They're ready. They're curious. They're super energetic. And when
Right.
there's a thing in front of them, they're going to go after it. But what helps them and really what's required right now in the way that education is built, whether it's in or sort of co-curricular out of school, is that adult that's working with them, that's the responsible adult in the room, if they're not confident about, we're building a machine that can stand up on markers and wiggle and draw and make marks. If that adult doesn't really feel confident that they can answer the why question, so why does it do it? Or even ask the why question. That little kid is really being given the short end of the stick, and they're not going to be inspired. They're
Yeah.
going to lose that.
Yeah.
So, that's why it's so important for us to put the experience that educators have at the center of the products that we design and build. This goes back to cohort 8, empathizing with our users, not just our buyers, and also empathizing with our users, not just our beneficiaries, being able to tell the difference that the students that make Sparks that we manufacture, we design and
Yeah.
manufacture, they're not the users. They're the beneficiaries. The users, the people at the center, are those educators.
Yeah.
So in being thinking from a business standpoint, if the business of education, especially public elementary education, is standardized testing at 3rd grade and 5th grade, the people that are really being held accountable are the educators in those classrooms.
Yeah.
All of the pressure is sitting on those people. And we can learn so much more through hands-on experiential learning. We can apply the concepts when we're making the thing so much more quickly, and we can integrate it so much more cleanly and with more joy. That just made it really clear that we needed to solve the problem of educator joy along with the content. And so if you think back to shop class, or I
Yep.
think back to vocational arts or voc ed, I know that my shop teacher or when they shut down the shop stuff, my art teachers, those were the people that were closest to it in middle school and high school. Those people experienced joy because they understood that what they were teaching us had real world application.
Mm-hmm.
That the jewelry casting class or the drawing class, these were things that we had to we had to apply our knowledge. We had to look and think critically, not just make it look like, we weren't copying a thing. We were coming up with our own solution to the design challenge they put out there for us. So, schools right now have a real problem, which isn't low student performance necessarily. It's low engagement of educators, low confidence of educators, and really, sort of low expectations. Educators have just, they're cooked, they're done.
So
and there's nobody in the pipeline.
right.
If I was really thinking about, if I was in the educator creation business, which universities are in, they struggle. Their pipelines are dry. So how do we spark some joy so the ones that are truly committed and are there will stay? And that's a bigger challenge. And that's, I think is that's what an art student who becomes a studio artist, who then becomes a shop teacher, can do to help other teachers build that confidence, where they just don't have the hands-on learning chops, but they can connect better with their kids if they do try. And we've built our whole venture around the success of educators.
So let's get into one of the core aspects of the remix of capitalism.
Yeah.
Tell me why people should think that, and you can talk about this in terms of your growth as a business and where you think this business is going. Can it be a big business? Why should people think that creating educator joy can become a big business?
If you want educators to stay educators, you focus on their joy. What did they do originally to get into that business? Why did they choose? Why do they opt in?
Yeah.
It is in some places it's relatively well compensated. In some places it's really not.
Yeah.
Let's take pay out of it. What is it that educators who truly are talented educators, what is it that keeps them in there? If you go to research that might be coming out of Project Zero in Harvard, or 4.0 schools in New Orleans, or, just look up, any articles on EdSurge that talk about educator retention and how do we build a new community, a new army of educators to backstop and to help recharge after an enormous flight and continuing flight of elementary and high school educators. They're leaving. I mean,
but hopefully,
marketplace.
But let me. Hopefully, you're going to land the plane in the airport that I want to direct you to.
Okay.
I'm not questioning the fact that this is an important thing to do.
Yeah.
Right. But I could hear people saying, yeah. It's a niche business. It's a quote unquote social impact business, which means it can't be a big business, and there's no reason for venture capital to care about it. So why I can give my own impression, but I'll hear it from you.
Yeah.
Why do you think that this is a business that deserves the funding that we gave you and that can be a significant creator of value for you and for your family?
Sure. The customers that we're working with now, the folks that are our stakeholders now, have been really clear that they have two main priorities. The buyers are interested in making sure that there are engaging, standards-based, practical, hands-on learning that's screen-free. They're clear and consistent. They want kids to come to school or come to their after-school programs or their library programs or their community programs, and they want them to engage without a screen. But more importantly, they want those educators that are on their staff to love it. They want them to have a great time being the coaches, not being the teachers. being the
Mm-hmm.
coaches and the supporters in those classrooms. They want those learners to connect and communicate effectively with each other, to think critically and problem solve on their own and together. And they want things to go home so their caregivers and parents and others and siblings and family members can see what they're making and doing and learning. And that's something that you can't get, in an iPad and Chromebook world. There's not a lot that's going to go home and stick on the fridge, let alone stay on the shelf. Things that they make to keep to bring home. This is, shared materials is the default. And it's not necessarily because of budget. It's because of the way that the system was built. So when they
Mm-hmm.
have opportunities to bring, here is a project that we are going to do as a team, and that when you're done, it's yours and it's going home with you. The engagement goes up. This is a University of Maryland study that we did last year. We can clearly show that when they know that the thing that they're about to do is theirs and they're going to be able to take it home, and by the way, it happens to wiggle and draw, it's just like, boom, okay, I'm on it and I'm in it. We saw attendance go up on the days that our projects were being used in classrooms. Like, these are the things, these are very practical things.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
It's very, very practical. And I hope that I'm circling the airport, but I
Yeah,
really do want to land
yeah,
that at the end of the day, those buyers want to know that the users, those teachers, are joyful, confident, and felt like it aligned with what they were already tasked with having to do. And then satisfied that original urge, which is, this is why I got involved in this in the first place.
so you're
To see
solving a
the joy
real
with my learners.
problem for that customer. How's the business going?
It's going exactly where we think it should be right now.
Yeah,
We went from being very product centered to
yeah,
being very learner outcome centered. And now we've been able to sort of, and I spoke with you, 2 years ago, we were still in a service business approach that's developing physical product that needs to be manufactured at scale. And we had staff and a team that delivered those services. It was, 10 years of delivering services in community, in greater DC, in Baltimore, in the Mid-Atlantic. And being able to build on having the experience coaching and being there in classrooms alongside educators and really learning how to co-teach and taking back that secret sauce and knowing and empathizing with educators, we were able then to very, very, this is a hard decision to make. It was really painful, but to say, okay, our model is not supporting a service delivery team. We can't afford to staff what we do. And we had to, downscale and then eliminate the service side of our business so we could just focus on ensuring that our products were phenomenal, that they were being, manufactured in a lean and consistent and high quality way, that we had the right team and the right size team. And finally now, and this is why I said 2 years is the right time. It's not a long time, because it's really what future makers needed to make that shift.
Yep.
And now our relationships are in California and Louisiana and Illinois and New York, and not just in Prince George's County.
So you've been able to scale.
County.
Tell really quickly, because we're running up on time, and I have a few other things we need to get to. But tell really quickly, just sort of we saw a big palette of products going out behind you early in the program. What's the product? Tell us about the product.
There's 6 different products that are going to a distributor that has integrated our products into their product. There's a library furnishings company called Demco in Wisconsin. And they have a maker cart. They have a cart that's used in public and school libraries all over the place. And it contains all the things that when you were a kid, and even now probably, Jeff, you'd really love. Stuff to tinker and build with, from Legos to things that blink and boop. And then that's 6 different products, things that fly, things that roll, things that wiggle, all the parts and components that then become part of Demco's Maker Card. So we have a wonderful partnership, and we're able to support them. It's been great for us, and these are materials that are foam and cardboard and motors and batteries and 3D printed parts and laser cut parts. And like behind us, I've got 100-year-old die cutting printing presses. And on the other side of the machine, there's a robot arm that loads and unloads a laser cutter all day long.
Yeah.
We are focused on just making those great hands-on learning experiences. So that kind of partnership with a distributor like Demco has been great. And those distributor relationships are growing for us and allowing us to really sort of make a bigger impact and become more and more stable as a manufacturing business.
Couple of final questions. So I'm going to stay on this path for a minute. Why did you want to join the Conscious Venture Lab? This is, I'm shamelessly soliciting an advertisement.
It started with a mutual friend, Larry Rivets.
Yeah.
It started with a person who's a real advocate for education, for learning.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Larry,
Baltimore.
And, if it wasn't for Larry, you wouldn't have gotten in because I was ed tech. I'm not interested. And Larry basically said, Jeff, you have to do this. So when Larry tells me I have to do something, I do it.
Well, and I hope that not just that, but I hope that the thing that made it really clear to me was we were ready to fully commit to being a manufacturer. And Larry and you and others in the cohort, Joe and everybody really helped me understand the why, solidify the why, follow that up with the how, so we could develop the what and we could deliver the what. Yep. And now that those things are there, I think that it's crystal clear that at the time, one good idea is turning into more profitable ideas, and that's if you're a founder that really is trying to validate is the solution that I'm offering ready for prime time. If you're someone that really wants to understand not just why you do it, but who you are doing it with and for, and to start putting those stakeholders at the front of your business plan, not at the output end of your business plan. That's why you need to get your stuff together, put it down on paper, and apply. You got to do it.
Well, you did a great job. I mean, you're clearly turning into one of our best alumni, best CEOs. We're excited to see where this is all going. I'm going to take a little bit of a turn.
Okay.
Tell me about Cité Internationale des Arts Paris Studio. I read that in your bio, and I was like, wait a minute. You were in Paris. You had to do with food. Tell me about that whole thing. I'm a foodie. I want to understand what that was all about.
So this is ancient history, but this is this is a really important thing. One of the gifts of learning how to be a really great art student. I'm not going to talk about being a great artist, but one of the things that I learned how to be a learner when I was at WashU in St. Louis. I lived alongside people that were engineers and real problem solvers, and the people that I think really sort of solidified my interest in problem solving. And one of the gifts that WashU at the time had for graduating seniors was a competitive, you had to apply, but they have an apartment, along with a lot of other universities, have this apartment that overlooks the Seine in this big old building in Paris. And the Cité Internationale des Beaux-Arts is it's a condo for universities that have creatives. And I had a gift of time there right after graduation to do whatever it was that I was going to do. And that trip showed me I didn't have the chops. I really didn't have the chops to sit all by myself in a
Yeah.
room and be creative and talented and share my biggest feelings with the world. But what it did show me was I needed to learn how to communicate. I needed to learn how to circulate. I needed to learn how to support and get engaged in other people's stuff, and how to be a contributor, not just a receiver or a taker. So that was a short stint, doing a terrible job, being a very American in Paris, but being able to get away to look at what it means to be a, there's an opera singer down the hall. There's visual artists from Israel across the hall. There's folks from Germany and Spain. There's all kinds of humans there that just blew my, sort of North Shore Chicago high school kid mentality wide open.
Yeah.
And got me ready to go off on my own and come back to the United States and spend time, really
Unbelievable
be growing
experience.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like an amazing experience.
Thanks.
What's your vision for the future, Matt?
Oh man. I mean, it's coming true, and it's getting better. It is building hands-on learning experiences that educators are coming to us requesting, being more driven by ideas that are coming from our community of users. It's becoming more focused on really pushing the envelope of how do we measure the true benefit when a student or a learner in a in or out of school time program is making something that's theirs. Pushing consumables instead of reusables in classrooms is I think really the future. And right now, AI seems to be part of a future that is really crippling critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that our opportunity is to become that balance, whether it's screenless or low screen engagement and hands-on learning, and starting in an elementary setting. We're a perfect complement. The applied critical thinking skills, the communication collaboration skills. The future is social and emotional. The future is not strictly technical. And I think that that's why we exist. And we're going to help those educators connect with those learners, and those grade school students are going to succeed because of those really confident teachers that love making what we provide them.
That would be an ideal place to end the interview. However,
Yes.
you have to end like everyone else ends.
Yeah.
It's with the desert island mix.
Yeah.
All right. You're stranded on a desert island. You get to choose 5 songs or 5 albums. You can choose. I originally said songs. Ed Freeman wanted me to say albums. I said 3. He wanted 5. So you get 5 songs or 5 albums on your that you have with you for the rest of your life on your as you're stranded on a desert island. Go.
The ink spots, if I didn't care.
Okay. All
Uh,
right.
Take 5.
We've heard that one a few times. Love Take
Uh,
5.
I would definitely say Asia by Steely Dan.
Night.
Uh, um, Anything off of Joni Mitchell's Hijira album.
Okay. You got one
And
more.
man, it's got to be a bop. Oh shoot.
Maybe you don't need
Oh
five.
no no
Maybe you
no no
don't
no
need.
no 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 the
Okay.
flamingos. I only have eyes for you.
Perfect. Now they're in the interview. Matt, it's good to see you again,
Thanks, Jeff.
and thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking some time out of your day
Oh man,
to share with me, to share with the listeners, and we wish you nothing but success
thank you.
with Future Makers. Keep making futures, and we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Be
All right.
well.
Peace, brother.
Thank you.
Oh man, that was really awesome. Really enjoyed that discussion with Matt. First time we've done an interview with a portfolio company, a lab alumni. We're going to do a lot more of those. I hope you enjoyed it. Look at the show notes to check out Matt's Desert Island Mix and some of the other folks that he talked about he's collaborating with. But that's the show for today. Can't wait. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with the next issue of Capitalism Remix. See you later, y'all.